The Trail of Shards, Chapter 7. That's Odd. By the time I had gotten back to my aunt's chamber, it was almost sunset. When I went inside, my aunt was getting dressed for an early slumber. A tray in the corner held her untouched supper. I looked out the window. "May I go to the willow?" I found myself unconsciously asking. She turned to look at me. "The tree?" She stopped for a moment. "Well, I guess. It's not like I wouldn't know where you were." "Yes," she repeated slowly. "But don't tell Lisa, and be back for your food. Oh, and don't get in trouble." I smiled and left the room. I arrived a few minutes later at the tree. Jackson had gone hunting, so I was alone. I had never seen the sunrise nor set from the tree until that day. I stayed quiet, watching the sky darken. I was near the top of the trees when the clouds turned purple. I stayed quite a while after the sun had disappeared completely. I watched the stars shimmer, twinkling their beauty upon the world. Everything seemed so peaceful, so surreal, so wonderful. I shifted to lie on my back when I kicked a small branch and it actually started to glow. I jumped back, nearly falling out of the tree. It resembled a line of fireflies just sitting there in a row. I stared at it, panicking ever so slightly. "What?" I started, watching the light fade from the branch. It went dark. Curiously, I kicked it again. It stayed dark. Again, nothing. I said, thinking out loud. Just as I shifted out my hand to reach it, leaning to get a closer look, it lit again. It was brighter that time. I stumbled back once more, staring at it. The light seemed to flicker and spread. I wasn't afraid, but rather creeped out. It started to grow and covered the surface of the whole tree's bark, including the branch I was on. I started to hyperventilate. I was shaking, purely stunned. The light then spread to the leaves. The bark stopped glowing. I looked around in amazement. It was beautiful. Imagine thousands of stars tied together with a thin twine and attached to the branches of a mammoth-sized tree. That's close to what it felt like, only nicer, not so big and intimidating, but more like the feeling you get from watching a campfire. It was a yellow glow. I looked down to see the main trunk being illuminated in a golden glow and a certain sparkle to it. I climbed down to the next lowest branch and then reached out to touch a leaf. I pulled the strand towards me, touching each glowing petal. When I ran my hand down to the end of the strand, all of the leaves suddenly fell off. I thought that it was just the bit that I held, but the entire tree was shedding. Each and every one of its leaves still held its golden glow when it fell, up until it hit the ground. That's when things got really strange. The second they touched the grass, they turned to fireflies. I gaped at them, watching them land on the grass. The tree was The tree was dark, but I could still see its branches growing its leaves back a dark green. I climbed down completely, standing under the tree by thousands of fireflies. They landed in my hair, on my dress, and all around me. I held out my finger and one landed on it. I brought it close to my eyes, still in disbelief. I looked past it to a small pond behind the tree. It looked like a normal pond, had a lily pad or so. Only thing was, it hadn't been there when I had first arrived, nor the times I had been before. I walked over to it, leaving the bugs behind. When I bent over to look at my reflection, with the fireflies behind me, I had dirty blonde hair that was long and straight, blue eyes that seemed to shine, and a periwinkle dress with long sleeves. I reached out and poked the surface of the water. A flash ignited behind my eyelids, making me stumble back. When I opened my eyes, a ripple had started in the pond, and was spreading. I looked back into the water, but only saw my reflection, No fireflies. I spun around, still shocked by the flash. I hadn't been mistaken. They were gone, all of them. I whipped my head back to the pond. It was gone too. I started to breathe even more rapidly than I had before. At that point, I ran, and I didn't stop until I reached the wall. Once outside of the wall, I looked back. Out on the horizon, I could have sworn I saw a torch. It wasn't in the direction of the willow, but further to the left. I squinted to see it, but it was soon put out, and I dismissed it as lunacy, as I did with the rest of the events at the willow. I must have just been overly tired, I thought. But that was the worst possible thing for me to have inferred, for my ignorance was going to cost people their lives that night. And that's the end of Chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm going to warn you, this is where things get a little bit intense. So, I hope you enjoyed. Tune in for Chapter 8, and leave a like. Thanks.